The year was 2847 when everything changed for humanity. Admiral Grace stood on the bridge of the carrier Defiance, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the holographic broadcast. Her face showed no emotion, but inside her heart was breaking. The Galactic Concord, a council of 17 alien races who controlled most of the known galaxy, had just finished voting. The decision was unanimous. Humanity had to go. The high speaker appeared on the display. The alien was made of living crystal, its body pulsing with cold blue light as it spoke. The human species has been judged by this council. You are too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to remain among civilized peoples. You have one standard cycle to remove yourselves from all conquered territory. Any human ship found in our space after that time will be destroyed without warning. Grace felt Lieutenant Commander Danny Reeves step up beside her. He was a young man with dark hair and tired eyes. He had served under her for 5 years and she trusted him completely. "Where are they sending us?" Danny asked quietly. Grace touched a control and the display changed. It showed a region of space on the very edge of the galaxy. The area was marked in red and labeled with a name that made Danny's face go pale: the Dead Reach. It was a place of empty space, dead stars and radiation fields. No habitable planets, no useful resources, nothing but darkness and slow death. "They are not just exiling us," Danny said. "They are killing us. They just want it to happen slowly so they can pretend their hands are clean." Grace still said nothing. She was watching the other displays now. They showed Earth's colonies being surrounded by conquered warships. 47 worlds where humans had built homes and raised families. 12 billion people were being herded like animals toward a place where they were expected to die. On the planet New Geneva, President Shaw addressed the human population. He was an older man with gray hair and a face lined by years of difficult decisions. He stood in the Senate chamber with cameras broadcasting his image to every human world. "We will comply with the Concord's decision," said. His voice was steady but his hands were shaking slightly. "We will leave their space. We will go where they send us, but I want every human being to hear me clearly. This is not the end. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not give up. We adapt. We survive. We remember." The exodus began within days. Millions of ships launched from human worlds, carrying everything that could be moved. Families packed their belongings into cargo containers. Scientists loaded their equipment and research. Soldiers secured weapons and ammunition. Everyone knew they were heading toward death, but they went anyway because there was no other choice. The journey to the Dead Reach took 3 years. 3 years of traveling through conquered space while alien warships watched their every move. 3 years of rationing food and water and hope. Many people died along the way. The old and the sick were the first to go. Children were born in transit, taking their first breaths in the cold darkness between stars. But something else was happening during those 3 years, something the conquered never noticed. Chief engineer was a woman in her 40s with short brown hair and grease-stained hands. She had spent her whole life building things, and she was not about to stop now. She stood in the cargo hold of a transport ship, surrounded by her team of engineers and technicians. "Open it," said, pointing at a large metal container. One of her people unsealed the container. Inside were rows of fabrication cores, machines capable of building almost anything if given the right raw materials. The container was officially listed as agricultural equipment. The conquered inspectors had not looked closely enough to notice the difference. "How many did we get through?" asked. 412 cores, her assistant reported, plus enough raw materials to keep them running for years. The other ships have similar loads: tools, manufacturing equipment, weapons components, all hidden in plain sight. Smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in months. "They think they have beaten us. They think we are going to crawl into a hole and die. They have no idea what we are capable of." Similar scenes played out across the refugee fleet. Hidden communications passed between human commanders using frequencies the aliens had never discovered. Plans were made and shared and refined. By the time humanity reached the dead reach, they were not a defeated people looking for a place to die. They were an army preparing for a very long war. Admiral Grace met with the other military leaders in a secret location aboard her ship. The room was shielded against all known forms of surveillance. Around the table sat the best strategic minds humanity had produced. "The conquered expects us to struggle for a few generations and then fade away," Grace said. "They expect us to fight among ourselves for the few resources available. They expect us to become primitive and weak." She looked at each person in turn. "We are going to do the opposite. We are going to build. We are going to grow. We are going to become stronger than they can possibly imagine. And we are going to do it all without them ever knowing." General Commander of Ground Forces nodded slowly. "How long are we talking about? Decades? Centuries?" "As long as it takes," Grace replied. "We will not rush this. We will not make mistakes. Every step will be careful and calculated. Our children will continue what we start. Their children will continue after them. Humanity will play the longest game in galactic history." The first settlements in the Dead Reach were exactly what the conquered expected to see. Small clusters of habitats clinging to barren asteroids, people struggling to grow food in hydroponic bays, ships breaking down and being stripped for parts. When conquered probe ships came to check on the exiles, they saw exactly what they wanted to see: a dying species accepting its fate. They did not see what was happening underground. They did not see the tunnels being dug into asteroids. They did not see the factories being built in hidden caverns. They did not see the shipyards taking shape in the darkness between dead stars. They did not see the schools where children learned advanced science and engineering. They did not see the military academies training the next generation of soldiers. President Shaw died 15 years after the exile began. His last words were broadcast to every human settlement. "I will not live to see our victory," he said from his hospital bed. "But I know it will come. Stay hidden, stay patient, stay strong, and never forget what they did to us." Humanity remembered, and in the darkness of the Dead Reach, they began to build their revenge. 20 years had passed since humanity arrived in the Dead Reach. The conquered sent probe ships every few months to check on their exiled prisoners. The probes always returned with the same reports. Humans were scattered across barren rocks, barely surviving, slowly dying. No threat, no concern. The problem had been solved. The probes never detected what lay beneath the surface. Director Samuel Price walked through the underground corridors of Station Prometheus. He was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and calm gray eyes. He had been a junior administrator during the Exodus. Now, he ran the largest secret facility humanity had ever built. The station existed inside a hollowed asteroid nearly 50 kilometers across. From the outside, it looked like worthless space rock, covered in craters and cosmic dust. Inside, it was a city. 300,000 people lived and worked here in rotating shifts. Factories hummed with activity. Research labs pushed the boundaries of science. Training facilities prepared soldiers for battles that might not come for generations. Samuel's assistant was a young woman named. She had been born in the Dead Reach, one of the first generation who had never known any home but exile. She walked beside him with a tablet in her hands, reading off production reports. "Shipyard 7 finished another destroyer last week," said. "That brings our shadow fleet to 412 combat vessels. We also completed 6 new cargo haulers and 2 hospital ships." Samuel nodded. "And the stealth systems?" "The coding division has perfected the new absorption matrix. We tested it against captured-conquered sensor equipment. Even crystal arrays cannot detect our ships until they are within visual range, effectively invisible." They walked past a window overlooking one of the main factory floors. Hundreds of workers operated machines that built components for starships. Everything was organized and efficient. There was no wasted motion, no wasted material. Every resource in the dead reach was precious, and humanity had learned to use everything. "What about the network?" Samuel asked. Pulled up another screen. "We have listening posts in 63 conquered systems now. Small automated stations hidden in asteroid belts and debris fields. They intercept communications, monitor ship movements, and send reports back through encrypted channels. The elder races have no idea we are watching everything they do." Samuel allowed himself a small smile. The intelligence network had been one of their greatest achievements. Humanity knew more about what was happening in conquered space than most conquered species knew about each other. In another part of the station, Dr. Victor Grant led the Advanced Research Division. He was an older man with wild white hair and the distracted look of someone whose mind was always working on multiple problems at once. Today, he was presenting his team's greatest breakthrough to a gathering of colony leaders. "The elder races have used the same basic technology for thousands of years," Victor explained. He stood before a holographic display showing complex equations and ship designs. "Their hyperspace drives are powerful but predictable. When a conquered ship jumps, it creates an energy signature that can be detected across multiple light years. Everyone knows when they move and roughly where they are going." He pressed a button and the display changed. It now showed a small probe floating in the center of the room. "Our new system works on completely different principles. We call it shadow stepping." Victor activated the probe. It vanished without any flash of light or burst of energy. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. Then it reappeared on the other side of the room, again with no visible transition. "No energy signature," Victor said proudly. "No hyperspace wake. No warning of any kind. A ship equipped with this drive can appear anywhere in the galaxy, complete whatever mission it has been assigned, and vanish before anyone knows it was there." Colony Administrator Hayes leaned forward in her seat. She was a practical woman who had spent 20 years turning barren rocks into livable homes. "How soon can we put this in our ships?" "We have already begun the process. The first 100 vessels will be shadow-capable within the year. The entire fleet will be converted within 5 years." The implications were staggering. Humanity would be able to move through the galaxy like ghosts. They could go anywhere, see anything, and strike without warning. The Conquered's greatest advantage, their vast territory and established sensor networks, would become meaningless. While the military and scientific divisions worked on ships and weapons, others focused on keeping humanity alive and growing. The Dead Reach had been chosen for exile because it was supposed to be uninhabitable. The Conquered had not considered how creative humans could be when survival was at stake. Agricultural Director Maria Santos had transformed food production from a desperate struggle into a thriving system. Her teams built hydroponic farms in every available space. They developed new crops that could grow in low light and poor soil. They recycled every drop of water and every scrap of organic material. "We are now producing 15% more food than we need," Maria reported to the council. "The surplus is being stored for emergencies and future expansion. Our population is healthy and growing." Energy Director Frank had solved the power problem by embracing radiation instead of avoiding it. The Dead Reach was full of radiation that would kill most species. Frank's engineers built collectors that harvested this energy and converted it to usable power. "The same thing that was supposed to kill us is now keeping us alive," Frank explained. "We have more energy than we know what to do with. The Conquered would never think to look for settlements near radiation sources because no sane species would build there. That makes those locations perfect for us." Mining operations expanded into regions so dangerous that no Conquered ship would venture there. Human crews wearing heavy protection suits extracted minerals from asteroids swimming in lethal radiation. They processed these materials in hidden refineries and shipped them to factories throughout the dead reach. 20 years after exile, humanity had built the foundation of a secret empire. They had ships the enemy could not see. They had technology the enemy could not match. They had resources the enemy did not know existed. And they had something even more valuable. They had patience. President, who had taken office 5 years after Shaw's death, addressed the population on the 20th anniversary of their arrival. "Our parents and grandparents were sent here to die," she said. "They refused. They built and struggled and sacrificed so that we could have this moment. We are not survivors anymore. We are builders. We are growing stronger every day while the conquered forgets we exist." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "But we have not forgotten them. We remember every insult. We remember every world they took from us. We remember every family torn apart by their decision. And when the time comes, they will learn what happens when you try to bury humanity in the darkness." The crowd cheered. In shipyards across the dead reach, workers added another vessel to the shadow fleet. In research labs, scientists refined the next generation of weapons. In training facilities, soldiers prepared for a war that was still decades away. Humanity was patient, but humanity was also ready. 50 years had passed since humanity was banished to the dead reach. Half a century of building in secret, growing in the shadows, and watching the galaxy that had rejected them. The conquered believed humans were nearly extinct. The truth was very different. Commander Dawson piloted her shadow ship through the heart of conquered space. She was 42 years old, born in exile, trained from childhood for exactly this kind of mission. Her vessel was called the Silent Wind, and it moved through enemy territory like a ghost. No sensor could track it. No patrol could detect it. Had been doing this work for 15 years and she had never been caught. "Approaching reported her navigator, Lieutenant Chris Palmer. He was younger than eager and talented, one of the best pilots in the fleet. "Heavy orbital traffic detected. Looks like they are mobilizing their fleet again." Studied the sensor readings on her display. They were one of the more aggressive conquered species, reptilian creatures with 4 arms and a deep hatred for their neighbors. Another border dispute with the Dominion. "Seems like it. Third major conflict this decade. The conquered mediators keep trying to calm things down, but these two really hate each other." Smiled and made notes on her tablet. "Record all fleet positions and patrol schedules. This information will be very valuable to our people." This was what humanity had become. Invisible watchers, silent observers. They knew everything that happened in conquered space because they were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Thousands of missions like this one gathered information that flowed back to the dead reach through encrypted channels. Back home, the intelligence was analyzed and turned into strategy. Intelligence Director George Morton presented his findings to the Council. He was a heavy-set man with a bald head and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "The galactic conquered is not as stable as it appears," George said. "The elder races formed their alliance thousands of years ago to defend against external threats. With no enemies to fight, they have started fighting each other." He brought up a holographic map showing conflict zones across conquered space. Red dots marked border disputes. Yellow dots marked economic conflicts. Orange dots marked political tensions. They have been at each other's throats for decades. They are struggling with internal political divisions. The collective is experiencing an economic crisis. At least 7 other species have significant problems they are trying to hide from their allies. President studied the map carefully. She had led humanity for 30 years, and she had learned to think in terms of centuries rather than years. "How do we use this?" George grinned. "We help them, all of them, secretly of course." He explained the plan. Human traders, using false identities and shell companies, would insert themselves into conquered supply chains. They would sell resources that various species desperately needed. They would provide services that no one else could match. Both sides of every conflict would become dependent on mysterious suppliers who delivered quality goods at low prices. Economic advisor Roger Hunt took over the presentation. He was a thin man with glasses and the careful manner of someone who spent his life studying numbers. We have identified opportunities with at least 12 conquered species. If we proceed carefully, humanity can become essential to the galactic economy without anyone realizing we exist. The plan was approved and put into action. Within 5 years, human traders were operating throughout conquered space. They sold refined metals to the at prices that undercut established suppliers. They provided medical compounds to that their own scientists could not produce. They delivered food and technology and raw materials to whoever needed them. The traders were careful. They never met clients in person. They used different names and identities for every transaction. They routed payments through dozens of intermediate accounts. No one could trace the supply chain back to its source in the dead reach. Merchant Captain Lucy ran one of the most successful trading operations. She was older sister, a woman with red hair and a talent for business. Her ship carried goods worth millions of credits on every run. They placed another order, Lucy told her crew as they loaded cargo containers. They need industrial equipment for their mining colonies. We can deliver faster and cheaper than any conquered supplier. Her first officer, a man named Steve Park, checked the manifest. That makes them our third largest customer. They have no idea they are buying from humans. And they never will. As far as they know, we are a trading company based in neutral space. Our ships are registered under fake names. Our crews use false identities. We are ghosts making money. The strategy worked better than anyone had hoped. Within 2 decades, nearly a quarter of all interstellar commerce passed through human-controlled intermediaries. The conquered species grew wealthy from trade they did not understand. Their economies became dependent on mysterious suppliers who always delivered but never revealed themselves. Meanwhile, humanity continued to grow in the dead reach. Dr. Cole, Director of Colonial Development, presented the latest census data to the Council. She was a small woman with gray hair and a warm smile, but her eyes showed the steel beneath. We have exceeded pre-exile population levels for the first time. 14 billion humans across 382 hidden settlements. She changed the display to show a map of human territory. What had once been empty space was now dotted with colonies, stations, and outposts. We have terraformed 12 worlds in regions the conquered considers uninhabitable. We have shipyards capable of building any class of vessel. We have research facilities pushing the boundaries of known science. We have manufacturing centers producing everything from food to weapons. Our shadow fleet now numbers over 2,000 combat vessels. President looked at the map with pride and sorrow mixed together. Pride in what her people had accomplished, sorrow that they still had to hide. All of this, she said quietly, and we are still invisible to the galaxy. That is our greatest strength, George Morton reminded her. The conquered thinks we are dead. They have forgotten we exist. When the time comes to reveal ourselves, they will have no defenses prepared. They will have no strategies ready. They will be completely unprepared for what we have become. The waiting continued. Years turned into decades. The first generation of exiles passed away, then the second. Children grew up knowing nothing but the secret empire their grandparents had built. They trained and worked and waited for a day that might never come. Commander Dawson, now approaching 60, continued her reconnaissance missions. She had trained hundreds of younger officers to do what she did. The intelligence network expanded every year, covering more systems, gathering more information, preparing for possibilities that existed only in planning documents. Patience, told her students, patience is our greatest weapon. The conquered has existed for thousands of years. They think in terms of centuries. We have learned to think the same way. We will wait as long as necessary, and when we finally act, we will do so from a position of strength they cannot imagine. In the shadows of the Dead Reach, humanity continued to build its invisible empire. They did not know when their moment would come. They only knew that it would come eventually, and they would be ready. 100 years had passed since humanity was banished from the stars. A full century of exile, of building in secret, of watching and waiting. The conquered had long since stopped thinking about the species they had condemned. Human extinction was simply assumed, occasionally mentioned in history lessons, but otherwise completely forgotten. Then the scourge arrived. They came from the void between galaxies, from the empty darkness where no life was supposed to exist. Their ships were massive, some of them larger than moons, black and terrible against the stars. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They did not explain what they wanted or where they came from. They simply attacked. The first world to fall was a colony on the outer edge of conquered space. The scourge descended on the planet like a plague of insects. Their harvester ships stripped the surface of all organic material. Trees, animals, people. Everything that lived was collected and consumed. When they left, nothing remained but bare rock and empty oceans. Admiral Cole commanded the conquered defense fleet sent to stop the invasion. He was an officer, his crystalline body glowing with the colors of authority and confidence. 12,000 ships from 17 species gathered under his command. It was the largest military force the conquered had ever assembled. All units report ready, announced through the fleet communication network. We will engage the enemy at the. This is where we stop them. The battle began at dawn. The Scourge fleet numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Their harvester ships were supported by countless smaller attack craft that swarmed like insects. The conquered vessels formed defensive lines and opened fire with everything they had. It was not enough. The Scourge absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any normal fleet. Their ships repaired themselves even as they fought. Their smaller craft sacrificed themselves without hesitation to protect the larger vessels. For every enemy destroyed, 10 more took its place. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the conquered fleet had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing in all directions. Though one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy was a stripped husk, billions of lives ended in a single day. Admiral Cole survived the battle, but his confidence was gone. His crystal form now pulsed with the dark colors of fear and despair. He sent a desperate message to every conquered world. The enemy cannot be stopped. We need every ship, every weapon, every soldier that can be spared. If we do not find a way to defeat them, we will all die. In the Dead Reach, humanity watched. Communications officer Amy Trent monitored the flood of transmissions coming from conquered space. She was part of the intelligence division, trained to intercept and analyze enemy communications. But what she was hearing now was not military strategy. It was raw terror. "They are calling for help from everyone," Amy reported to her superiors. "The conquered is mobilizing everything they have left. They are talking about making a final stand at Axis Prime, the central station where their government meets." President Daniel called an emergency session of the council. He was the grandson of, raised from birth to lead humanity in times of crisis. Now he faced the biggest decision in 100 years of exile. "The scourge will consume the entire galaxy if they are not stopped," Daniel said. "The conquered cannot stop them alone. We have watched them try and fail. The question before us is simple. What do we do?" The debate that followed was intense. Council members argued for hours, sometimes shouting at each other across the chamber. Councilman Peter Drake spoke for those who wanted to stay hidden. "The conquered banished us. They sent us here to die. They deserve whatever happens to them. We should wait until the scourge destroys them and then emerge to claim what is left." Councilwoman Rachel Torres disagreed. The scourge will not stop with the conquered. Once they finish with the elder races, they will come for us. We cannot hide from an enemy that devours entire planets. Our only hope is to fight them now, while we still have allies who can share the burden. Admiral Grace III asked permission to speak. She was named for her great-grandmother, the woman who had witnessed the original exile. She had spent her entire life preparing for war. My ancestors were forced into darkness because the galaxy feared what we might become, Grace said. Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. For 100 years, we have built something remarkable in secret. Ships that cannot be seen, weapons that cannot be matched, an empire that exists in the shadows. She looked at each council member. But hiding forever is not living, it is just surviving. The scourge will destroy everything if they are not stopped. The conquered cannot stop them. We cannot stop them alone, but together we might have a chance. The vote was close, but the decision was clear. Humanity would reveal itself and offer alliance to the species that had once condemned them, not as conquered people begging for acceptance, not as conquerors demanding submission, as equals offering partnership in the face of extinction. President authorized a transmission to be sent to every communication frequency in conquered space. This message is addressed to all members of the Galactic Conquered, his voice announced across 1,000 worlds. 100 years ago, you banished humanity to the dead reach. You expected us to die in the darkness. We did not die. The transmission included holographic images of the human empire, shipyards building vessels by the hundreds, cities thriving on worlds the conquered thought were uninhabitable, a fleet of over 2,000 warships equipped with technology the elder races had never seen. We grew, we built, we watched, and now we offer you a choice. Face the scourge alone and fall, or accept our hand and stand together. The decision is yours, but make it quickly. Time is running out for all of us. The reaction in conquered space was immediate chaos. Species that had forgotten humans existed were suddenly confronted with proof that the exiles had become a major power. Fear mixed with hope, mixed with anger, mixed with desperation. High Speaker Os, the leader of the Galactic Conquered, convened an emergency session. The crystalline being stood before representatives of all 17 elder races. We banished them to die, Os said. They did not die, they became strong while we became weak. Now they offer to save us from enemies we cannot defeat. The High Speaker's form pulsed with conflicting colors. We have no choice. We must accept their help or face extinction. The response was sent within hours. Humanity, we accept your offer of alliance. Come quickly. The scourge approaches Axis Prime. If we fall here, there will be nothing left to save. In the dead reach, now renamed the human expanse by its inhabitants, the Shadow Fleet prepared to move. 2,800 warships activated their drives and plotted courses for conquered space. For the first time in a century, humanity was going home. Admiral Grace stood on the bridge of her flagship, the dreadnought Perseverance. She looked at the stars that had once been forbidden to her people. All ships report ready, her executive officer announced. Grace nodded. Then let us go remind the galaxy why they were so afraid of us. The fleet vanished into shadow space, heading toward the greatest battle in galactic history. The Scourge Armada advanced toward Axis Prime like a swarm of locusts crossing an endless field. Behind them lay the ruins of 37 worlds, their surfaces stripped bare, their populations harvested or scattered to the void. The remaining conquered forces had gathered at the great station for a final stand. They knew they could not win. They only hoped to buy time for civilian evacuations that were already too late. Then the human fleet arrived. Admiral Grace brought her ships out of shadow space in perfect formation. 2,800 vessels materialized from nothing, appearing without warning in positions around the conquered defensive line. The elder races had never seen anything like it. One moment empty space, the next moment a fleet of warships that had not existed seconds before. Grace opened a communication channel to the conquered command ship. "This is Admiral of the Human Coalition. We are here to honor our offer of alliance. Tell us where you need us most." High Admiral Os commanded the conquered forces. The crystalline being had fought the Scourge twice before and lost both times. Its form flickered with colors that showed shock, fear, and desperate hope all at once. "Your ships," Os said. "Our sensors cannot track them properly. They appear and disappear from our displays without pattern." Grace allowed herself a small smile. "That is intentional. Trust that we know how to use them. Now, where do you need us?" The battle plan was quickly coordinated. Conquered ships would form a defensive sphere around Axis Prime, absorbing enemy attacks and protecting civilian evacuation ships. Human vessels would use their shadow drives to strike deep into enemy formations, hitting targets of opportunity and disrupting Scourge coordination. Commander Dawson, now 73 years old but still one of the best officers in the fleet, led the first attack wave. Her battle group consisted of 50 shadow ships crewed by pilots she had trained personally. They had practiced for this moment their entire lives. "All units engage on my mark," said through the tactical channel. "Remember your training. Hit hard, move fast, do not give them time to react. Mark." Her ships vanished and reappeared inside the Scourge formation. They opened fire at point-blank range, pouring weapons energy into enemy vessels before the Scourge could respond. Then they vanished again, appearing somewhere else, firing again, vanishing again. The enemy had never faced anything like this. Their ships were designed to overwhelm opponents through sheer numbers. They expected enemies to stand and fight in predictable patterns. Human tactics made no sense to them. Targets appeared and disappeared without warning. Attacks came from impossible angles. Ships that should have been destroyed were suddenly somewhere else entirely. "Group 7 hit their command cluster," ordered. "Group 8 disable those harvester ships. Do not let them reach the station." The conquered commanders watched in disbelief as human vessels danced through the Scourge fleet like ghosts. Weapons that the elder races had never seen tore through enemy hulls. Tactics that conventional understanding created chaos in formations that had been unstoppable. Chief Engineer was present on the Perseverance as an observer. She was over 90 years old now, retired from active service, but unwilling to miss this moment. She had helped build the first fabrication cores during the Exodus. She had spent her life creating the technology that was now being used to save the galaxy. "Those fabrication cores we smuggled during the exile," said quietly to President, who stood beside her. "This is what they built." Watch the battle unfold on the tactical display. Human ships struck and retreated, each attack destroying Scourge vessels while taking minimal losses in return. "Worth every risk," he said. The battle raged for 3 days. Losses mounted on all sides. Human ships were destroyed when they stayed too long in one place or when Scourge weapons found them during the brief moments they were visible. Conquered vessels fell by the dozens defending the station, but the tide was turning. The Scourge had never encountered an enemy they could not overwhelm. They had consumed entire civilizations without difficulty. Now they were facing something new, an enemy that would not stand still. An enemy that struck from shadows and retreated before retaliation was possible. An enemy that fought with intelligence and creativity instead of simple numbers. On the 4th day, the Scourge fleet began to withdraw. Their massive harvester ships turned away from Axis Prime and headed toward the Galactic Rim. Their smaller attack craft covered the retreat, fighting desperately to protect the larger vessels. Human and conquered ships pursued, destroying stragglers and preventing any final attacks on civilian targets. When it was over, the space around Axis Prime was filled with wreckage. Thousands of ships from all sides floated dead in the void. But the station remained. The evacuation ships had escaped. And for the first time in the entire war, The scourge had been driven back. Admiral Grace received a communication from High Admiral Os. "We owe you our survival," the crystalline being said, its form now pulsed with colors of gratitude and shame. "We sent you to die. You came back to save us. I do not have words for this." Grace considered her response carefully. 100 years of exile, of hiding, of waiting. Her great-grandmother had watched humanity be cast out. Now Grace had led them home. "We did not come for gratitude," she said finally. "We came because the scourge threatened everyone. Human, conquered, it did not matter. They would have consumed us all. We chose to fight together because that was the only way to win." In the weeks that followed, the galaxy's political landscape transformed. The galactic conquered was forced to acknowledge that the species they had banished was now essential to their survival. Human ships continued to patrol conquered space, hunting scourge remnants and protecting vulnerable worlds. High Speaker Os addressed the reconvened council, with humanity's representatives present for the first time in a century. "We banished you because we feared you," Os admitted. "We told ourselves you were dangerous, unstable, unworthy of standing among civilized species. We were wrong. We nearly destroyed ourselves because of that fear." President stepped forward to respond. "We do not seek apologies for the past. We cannot change what was done. We can only choose what happens next." He looked around the chamber at representatives of 17 species who had once condemned humanity to extinction. "The scourge will return someday. Other threats will emerge. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. None of us can face it alone." The new compact was signed 1 year later. Humanity received full recognition as a sovereign power, their territory acknowledged and mapped. Trade agreements established economic ties between human and conquered worlds. Defense treaties created joint military commands to prepare for future threats. Cultural exchanges began healing wounds that had festered for a century. Admiral Grace retired after the treaty was signed. She spent her final years on a colony world that had been terraformed from a barren rock during the exile. Children played in parks that had been carved from asteroid stone. Families lived in homes that had been built by people who refused to accept extinction. Her aide, Commander Young, visited her often. On one visit, they sat together watching a sunset that had been impossible before human engineers shaped the atmosphere. "Strange, is it not?" said. 100 years of hiding, and now we are allies with the species that tried to kill us." Grace smiled. Her hair was white now, and her face was lined with age, but her eyes still held the fire that had driven her entire life. "Not strange at all. This is what humanity does. They tried to break us and we built an empire. They ignored us and we became essential. They feared what we might become and we became exactly that." She looked at the sky turning orange and purple as the sun set. "We are not just part of the galaxy now. We are the ones who prove that survival is not enough. You have to grow. You have to build. You have to become something no one expected." In the human expanse, celebrations continued for months. Children who had grown up in hidden colonies walked freely under open skies. Traders who had operated in shadows announced themselves proudly. Soldiers who had trained for a war that might never come had proven their worth beyond all doubt. Humanity had been banished from the stars. They had spent a century building in darkness, growing in silence, preparing for a moment that might never arrive. When that moment came, they were ready. They returned not as refugees begging for acceptance, not as conquerors demanding submission. They returned as saviors who had chosen to help the very species that had wronged them, and in doing so, they proved something that the elder races had failed to understand. Humanity was never dangerous because of their aggression or their unpredictability. They were dangerous because they never gave up. They never stopped building. They never stopped hopping. And when the galaxy needed them most, they were there. The stars that had once been forbidden now welcomed them home.